How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and this is my channel PSReady that's all about PlayStation. I had to film this intro like 3 times because I got confused about all my channels. In today's video, we're talking about how the PS3 is back for a bad reason, how Xbox seems to have completely given up, and how it's a pretty sad day at Sony. Before I jump into it all, I'm on the path to 200,000 subscribers. I'd love if you help me get there, so whether you've been here for a while or maybe you're new here, it would help me out if you subscribed and set your notifications to all. And if you have notifications already set to all, check that they're not set to personalized, because for some reason that only feeds out like a couple of the videos I post every week. Regardless, either way, thanks to everyone who subscribed here lately. The channel's been doing great and it's all thanks to you. But let's jump into the first news story here, which is that Sony has remembered the PS3 exists. They've released an update for this console, and when I looked into it, I was initially very excited for reasons I'll get into in a couple of minutes, but when I looked into it more, it seems like this 200 megabyte update for the PS3 is just basically that classic Sony move where when they have the PS5 out, they're 2 generations past it, they're already having problems there, like with network connectivity and things like that. They go back and waste time and resources into releasing an update where all it does is block your ability to hack your PS3 or even get the games dumped to emulate them on PC. Now, there's a few reasons why I don't like that. The first one being there's no actual way to actually play PS3 games in a quality level. Sorry, my dog Coco finally mastered the stairs and made her way into the basement. But yeah, the only way to play PS3 games right now on your PS5 is to use the PS Plus premium streaming, which I've done a few videos here on the channel over the years, and every time I check into this system that they've developed over at Sony, it's below subpar. It's not even close to par. It's just not good. Like, if you're playing 2 generations old games, yes, the PS3 outputs in 1080p, which is awesome, but the textures aren't going to be as good. The gameplay systems are going to be a little bit archaic, and the graphics themselves are not going to be anything crazy. The frame rate is usually capped at 30. So when you're already playing with all of those, old concessions, introducing things like blocky textures, which are a plague on the PS3 streaming, introducing things like latency, which is already bad because of the low frame rates, but is even worse when you're streaming games over the network. For some reason, it works fine when you're streaming remote play from your PS5 to your Portal or your Steam Deck, but when you're streaming from the cloud with PS3 games that are over decades old at this point, the latency is worse than it's ever been. And then introducing things like connectivity issues, which plague that console. I have gigabit internet here at my house. It's the best internet you can get. Basically, it's business class. I upload YouTube videos in like 5 seconds. It's awesome. But when I use PS3 streaming with PS Plus Premium on my PS5, it's terrible. So streaming being the worst option, the best option you have right now is to just plug in your PlayStation 3 and play those old games. Like, honestly, I've been thinking about hacking my PlayStation 3 because resale prices are absolutely skyrocketing because these games are getting harder and harder to find as collectors buy them, as all these sites like DK Oldies and these retro game sites buy up the massive supply of games out there. The prices on the resale market just continue to go up to the point where a lot of PS3 games are basically selling at retail at this point. So yeah, I've been considering hacking my PlayStation 3, and the hack that you've been able to do for a while now is honestly pretty good. So to know that Sony is just going back and patching the PS3 to block that when it's so few people even doing it in the first place, that's not the stuff I want to see them focusing on. There are still things I want my PS5 to do, like emulate PS3 games, and I'd like to take any time, energy, and money that they're willing to devote to that console and filter it all into that instead of these weird 200 megabyte patches that don't even really do anything. It's also even crazier when you think back to just a year or so ago, maybe a couple years ago, when they decided that they were just going to kill the PS3 store and the Vita store entirely. Of course, there was massive backlash to that because there is no way, at least to play Vita games unless you have a PS Vita, and there's definitely no way to play PS3 games unless you're streaming them from the cloud. So when they're like gonna lock down the store and stop you from even legitimately buying these games, there's no reason for them to just shut down the store when the only reason they want to do it is to block exploits and being able to hack your PlayStation 3. Of course, they reversed that decision for an indefinite amount of time. I think they're just waiting for less and less people to care there, to the point where when they do officially announce the shutdown of these storefronts and the online services and everything like that, there are just so few people playing legitimately that it's not going to cause a big enough outcry where they're going to have to do something about it. So yeah, if you're still using your PlayStation 3, I would recommend not updating it. You're probably not even connected to the internet anyway. And if you are still connected to the internet with it, I don't really know why you are, outside of checking your licenses, because as far as I'm aware, there aren't even a lot of games anymore that you can even play online on the PlayStation 3. I mean, if you want to download your stuff, I get that conceit, like you would want to connect to the internet to download your older games, but if they're already on your console, it might be worth shutting off your Wi-Fi for a sec and turning on your PS3, making sure it can't connect to the internet, and then turning off Wi-Fi on it entirely. I don't know if you can even take it as far as like taking out the Wi-Fi chip or something like that, but yeah, these updates are never good anymore. They're just stability and performance fixes, and all they really do is block exploits. So if you have any inkling of ever hacking your PS3, do not update it to this new patch. There's your PSA for the day. It's just a really sad state of affairs because the PS3 is really what got me into PlayStation gaming again. I had a PS2 back in the day. My friend gave me one. I had a ton of games with it, like Shadow of the Colossus, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3. There were so many great games I experienced, but I didn't really have that fandom pull because my dad got me an Xbox and I was younger and I was like, this is so cool. And then when the next generation came around, I started with a Wii. I bounced off that pretty quick. I used my lawn mower money to pick up an Xbox 360 core. I got mono in middle school, and then I had to have my dad go get me a memory card so I could get my Halo 3 save on the console, which was kind of an experience. And then one Christmas, I got enough money from my grandpa where I was like, hey, maybe I'll go buy a used PS3. And I picked up games like Resistance 2, Uncharted 1 and 2, Little Big Planet 2, and Infamous. And I spent that entire break just playing through this amazing library of games that only Sony could really offer at the time. And some would say that even 2 generations later, they still are offering those quality experiences and they're the only ones doing it. I think all of that really started with the PS3 generation. So yeah, losing access to that console as time goes on really sucks. It hits me in my nostalgic core because yeah, I loved the PS3 back in the day. That brings us to the second news story here, which is whether or not Xbox has just completely given up on their brand. So I know you've heard the news. I've talked about it well enough here on the channel. There's 4 games coming over to the PlayStation ecosystem from the Xbox side of the fence. We're getting Pentiment, we're getting Grounded, we're getting Sea of Thieves, and we're getting Hi-Fi Rush. Some of those games are being released physically through limited run games, which is fine. I'm not going to be picking any of them up regardless because I have them on PC and they're available on Xbox Game Pass. There's really no reason for me to pick them up on my PlayStation 5, but I know some people are excited for them. The curious thing though is that Xbox is not doing anything that they would have done in the past, right? Like remember back when they released MLB The Show on Xbox because Sony kind of got into a bind where they had to renew their license with the MLB, and the MLB basically strong-armed them and said, hey, if you don't release this game on Nintendo Switch and Xbox, we are not going to renew this deal. So Sony did that, and then Xbox kind of undercut them in a shady way and put the game on Game Pass day one. And ever since they've done that, MLB The Show has performed very well over on the Xbox side of the fence. But this time around, with all of these new games, it's weird because when you go to them on the store, like when you go to Pentiment's store page or you go to Hi-Fi Rush's store page, it doesn't even say Bethesda or Obsidian. It just says Microsoft Game Studios or Microsoft Corporation or something like that. There's no mention of Xbox whatsoever. And if rumors are to be believed from Tom Warren, when you start these games up and get the initial splash screen, you're going to see Obsidian, you're going to see Tango Gameworks logo, but you're not going to see Xbox branding anywhere until you log into the servers with your Microsoft account on Sea of Thieves. Honestly, this blows my mind because why wouldn't you advertise that these are Xbox games? Like, isn't the whole point of this to drive engagement with the Xbox brand, to show people that, yeah, you are making good games that are worth paying attention to? Like, hey, you just played Pentiment, you're excited for Avowed, maybe you want to go pick up an Xbox Series X. I don't think any casual person out there is even going to know that these are Xbox games in the first place. Like, if they're casually browsing the store, like they got a PlayStation gift card for their birthday or something and they're looking for a new game, they see Hi-Fi Rush, it's got cool cel-shaded graphics, it's a rhythm game at heart, they decide to roll the dice on it, you would want them theoretically to see an Xbox logo the first time they start up the game. But for some reason, Xbox is now just playing as nice as possible with Sony. I don't know if Sony had some rule or something where they said, hey, if you want to put these games on PlayStation, that's fine, but we better not see any Xbox branding. I don't know why Sony would even think to do that, because I don't think anyone is going to go buy an an Xbox Series X after playing these games, especially with all the rumors of the summer showcase reveal being an all digital Series X. Like, that's just throwing gasoline on the fire that's already started as far as I'm concerned with the Xbox brand. So like, I don't think Sony would be strong arming them back in that situation. It's just so bizarre to hear the speaking out of both sides of the mouth from Phil Spencer, right? Like in this announcement, he's like, we're starting with 4 games. And then they say in an interview right after with Tom Warren, he's like, well, I wouldn't count out anything like Indiana Jones or Starfield. Like those could eventually come over to other consoles, just depending on how these 4 games do. But like in reality, it's not like they just woke up 2 days ago and said, hey, I think we should put these games on PlayStation. Go hit the port button and get them ready to go. They've had to have been working on this for a long time. And I saw a lot of Xbox fans who are losing faith in the Xbox brand, like all the fanboys out there on Twitter. You know who I'm talking about. They're pretty upset because I guess over a year ago, a developer joined Sea of Thieves to help them with development. And that developer has basically revealed that they are the port studio that's been porting this game over since like 2023. So this stuff takes a long time. So if they're sitting there saying like, yeah, we're starting with 4 games, there's no way they're going to let there be a huge gap, right? Like where they release these games, they sell well, they get good telemetry, they say, hey, why don't we port over some other games like Starfield or Indiana Jones? There's no way they're going to start that development then. I would bet that they already have these games in development ready to go, and eventually it is going to get to the point where they say, hey, we can just hit the port button, like release the port we already have sitting on our computers over at Microsoft because, you know, the first 4 games we released did really well. But yeah, as far as Xbox just giving up on their branding, I think it's like very clear that whether they know it or not, they kind of are here. It's the worst case scenario when it comes to porting these games over for them. And like, I don't really know what the problem is, honestly. Their marketing is so out of whack. Their PR speak is terrible. They just need to like take a step back, reorganize entirely the way they talk to their fans and even the fans on PlayStation, and really get some confidence. They're always on the back foot. They're always playing defense. There's zero confidence. And I think we need to see more of that from Xbox. But that doesn't mean Sony's perfect by any means, because that brings us to the third news story today, which is that Sony has announced some major layoffs at some of their biggest studios. And they made this more of an announcement to say, hey, this isn't a good thing. We're letting you know it's happening because we overhired during COVID. And yeah, we have way too many people working here. The margins are too small with our games and we need to lay off some people. They said we envision reducing our headcount by about 900 people or 8%, which, you know, is the amount that every other developer out there seems to be restructuring by. When they announce these layoffs, they tend to lay off about 8% of their workforce. But when you're using a company like Sony, for example, versus someone like Supermassive Games, 8% means a lot different of a number of people. So when you have a big corporation like Sony, 8% equals 900 people. They said in the UK that PlayStation Studios London studio will close in its entirety, that there will be reductions in Firesprite Studio, and that there will be reductions in various functions across SIE in the UK. Now, they were honestly a little bit vague there, but they did lay people off from Naughty Dog. They laid people off from Guerrilla Games, the people who make Horizon. Firesprite, I kind of get because they made a VR game and like, yeah, that's cool and all, but like it didn't sell very well. So if you're looking at the dartboard and saying, who am I going to lay people off from? I feel like a VR studio is the way to go. Closing down London studio is kind of a bummer because apparently they were working on a live service game, but then they apparently also canceled this live service Twisted Metal game that we just heard was about to be announced. And honestly, that's a huge bummer because out of all of PlayStation's classic studio franchises, like I feel like Twisted Metal would have been a good one to bring out in some sort of live service form. The car combat system, having it be all online, having battle passes with car customization. There's obviously so much you can do there, but this one's been being worked on for a long time. Initially, the studio that worked on Destruction All-Stars was working on it, and then they were taken off of it. It was given to some unannounced studio, and apparently they've been working on it for the entire PS5 generation, but it just wasn't coming together. I do like that they're stepping back from live service, though. Obviously, they just had a hit with Helldivers 2. Hopefully, they're saying, look, we have a system here that works. Smaller games for smaller price tags with good monetization strategies sell a lot of copies. Maybe we need to focus on that versus huge experiences like Twisted Metal or something, or Destiny 2, where people are going to make this game their second job. Unfortunately, this is just the reality right now. I don't think these layoffs are going to stop anytime soon, which really sucks. But yeah, they need to recalibrate, obviously, back to the days of before COVID, because when everyone was at home, they were spending a lot of money on video games. So they overhired, they tried to pump out a bunch of content, and at the time, they were getting a lot of revenue out of that. But now that people are, you know, back to normal and they're going outside and they're not sinking every hour of every day into playing live service video games, that revenue has dropped. And you combine that with the small margins of the $300 million games like Spider-Man, something needs to change, right? Like they need to change the budgets. They need to get rid of some people. I understand that, but it just sucks to see the people who deserve to be punished the least always being the ones that are punished. But yeah, guys, that's all I've got for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.